Welcome, everyone. I'm psyched to be presenting at this Web3 event and talking a bit about AI and Web3, and what role AI can play to help Web3 to realize all of its visions, and how Web3 can fuel AI as well. And as someone old enough to remember when there was no web and nobody had an email account and so forth, in some ways I feel like Web3 is coming full circle, or maybe full spiral, right? Because one of the really cool things when the internet first came out and the web first became popular was the radical decentralization that it embodied, right? I mean, every country in the world could be on the internet, and you had, you know, BBSs, like someone in their house put a bulletin board service up on some computers. Everyone in the local area who was interested in the topics on the BBS would log on and discuss, and it was hosted in a physically and culturally decentralized way, right? And the decentralization was part of what was really cool about it. I mean, anyone could put up a web server hosting their information, and you were spidering the web to get knowledge. And I remember in 1995, I was in my how old would I have been then? In my late 20s. I had the idea to run for U.S. president on the decentralization party candidate, right? And that was all part of the decentralization that the internet was bringing. I've since realized that being president would be a terrible job, and we should be, routing around national governments rather than bolstering their power. But the point is, in the early days of the internet, things are actually more decentralized than what evolved. And what happened then is you had Google, you had Facebook, you had these economies of scale that come from massive server farms with loads of data sitting on these massive server farms and data centers. And no more would you sort of spider the internet, having a process that hops from server to server to get information. Instead, you just look on someone's centralized cache of the internet, and then it becomes a whole different thing. The internet becomes a sort of pastiche of subnets controlled by massive companies, stored for efficiency on their data centers. And that let a lot of really cool things happen. It let a lot of machine learning be done on massive server farms associated with these centralized data centers. On the other hand, it had a big toll. I mean, we lost the sort of wild and crazy cyber cowboy aspect of the early internet. We also, lost data sovereignty, and we lost the power to the individual that was there in the early internet. And we have now an internet controlled by a few large corporations operating closely with their governments, right? And what we see with Web3, in a way, is going back to some of the ethos of the early cyberpunk internet, where we now have the technology basis, just barely, but we're at the beginning of having the technology basis to do what these big companies have done with their centralized data centers and server farms, but to do these things in a way that better reflects the original decentralized ethos of the internet. And it's harder to do these things in a decentralized way, but there's a big payoff, right? There's a payoff in terms of the autonomy and personal freedom that comes with having people own their own data and their own profile, and more directly control processing, And I think there's a follow-on payoff in terms of the creativity that you get when you give more agency to participants in a network. And I'm really psyched to see that the progress that's being made toward making a decentralized web a reality. I mean, I think there's a lot of focus now on NFTs and on metaverses. I think these are all really cool and have revolutionary potential. I'm going to talk a little more about them in the next few minutes, but I think these are manifestations of underlying sort of nitty-gritty infrastructure aspects of enabling decentralized technology to do what centralized technology has done in Web 2.0 and then more so, right? So I want to now talk a little bit about how AI plays into all this, right? So I mean, I think to do the decentralized web, plain and simple, doesn't really need AI. What you need is massively scalable blockchain technology underlying the basic operations of the web and the internet. And I think we don't really yet have that, but I mean we're getting closer and closer. I've been impressed with the Elastos design for quite some time since the beginning, but I think there's a lot of other interesting approaches also. I think there are ways that AI can help to scale up the decentralized infrastructure for the web, thus enabling Web 3.0. And I also think that there's a lot of ways that Web 3.0 will allow AI to be used more impactfully than Web 2.0 has, both in terms of allowing greater intelligence and more ethical use of the AI also. So in terms of how AI can help Web 3.0 to work better, I mean one key role is just inside the guts of the underlying blockchains. I mean, I think most of what, if you really dig down, most of what makes decentralized networks less efficient than centralized networks is just having to prevent fraud and having to squash various kinds of attack vectors and bad actors. And to the extent you can use machine learning to recognize various kinds of attacks before they happen, to predict what kinds of attacks are going to happen, and to estimate the reputation of various actors in a decentralized network, feeding into sophisticated reputation systems like the weighted liquid rank reputation system we have within the SingularityNet platform that I run. I mean, that using AI to estimate reputations of agents and to predictably identify attacks before they happen, this allows you to operate in much more efficient ways in the underlying blockchain network. So that's one aspect. I think there's a lot of ways you can use AI to drive information-centric networking within decentralized blockchain-based networks. So I mean that if you have the whole internet on some centralized Google server, of course that's efficient, but there's a big cost in terms of sovereignty and agency and ownership and manipulation of all the parties in the network, right? Now, if you have information stored in a more heterogeneous way, where ownership of data and processing is more heterogeneous and distributed, I mean, then there's more role for AI in helping to route information toward where it needs to be, so people can more efficiently navigate this decentralized network and get what they need efficiently. And this is interesting. It requires interoperation of AI with encryption via multi-party computing, homomorphic encryption, and so forth, because you're needing to do like information centric networking to make sure people can rapidly get the information they need, even when some of that information is encrypted with the keys of this group of parties. Some information is encrypted with the keys of that group of parties. And there's a lot of deep computer science there. But the long and short of it is there's a lot of ways AI in the plumbing of the blockchain networks is going to be critical for enabling blockchain technologies to scale to deliver Web 3.0. But I don't want to dig too deep into that here, because this isn't really a computer science talk, right? I want to talk a little more on the application level and the UI UX level. And I think looking at that level, another key way that AI can help enable Web 3.0 is in terms of your own individual profile. Like what is my profile on Web 2.0, right? Like Google knows a lot about me, Facebook knows a lot about me, Twitter knows a lot about me, the NSA and Chinese Communist Party probably know a lot about me, right? And these modules, these clumps of information about me are stored fragmented all over the place, and they're stored in the databases of various big companies. Some of that I could download if I went through a complex procedure, some of which they're not going to tell me what they know. Of course, how it should be is the information about me and my browsing behavior and what I like to read and what I like to do should be stored in a way which is owned by me, which is encrypted in a way I can control, which is shared with others in as much as I permit it, and which then is augmented and improved by machine learning algorithms, guessing more different things about me based on my observed behavior, where, I know what the machine learning is doing. I can probe and look transparently at what the machine learning model says about me and what it's telling to whom. And there's no profound technological obstacle to that. Right now, we have the tech to do that. It's just not the way that the internet has been built, because it's been built in order to maximize shareholder value for centralized corporations and maximize espionage value for associated governments. So I think this bit of having our own machine learning driven profiles that are owned and controlled by us, this is really important. I mean, doing this in a way that's usable and easy and simple certainly is a it's a user experience challenge, but it's certainly one that can be met if there's a motivation. And to flesh this out a little, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about how this gets cashed out in some important vertical market areas. So my own role in this now is I'm CEO of SingularityNet, which is the leading blockchain-based AI platform. I got into this originally because my life quest as a researcher is to build thinking machines, to build beneficial artificial general intelligence, as it will be as smart as people, ultimately smarter than people, and it will be kind and compassionate to people and working together with people to do amazing things. It seemed to me that to get to benevolent AGI, we need an AGI that isn't doomed by a single point of failure, and that is running on a democratic participatory network. And so SingularityNet provides that democratic participatory decentralized network to build AGI algorithms on. But then general intelligence isn't going to be built in a day. It may be built in the next few years, but we're going to get there by applying AI to do useful things for people step by step across various vertical application areas. And then within those vertical application areas, making applications that achieve greater and greater levels of general intelligence. So then within SingularityNet, which is working on the decentralized blockchain-based AI platform and the AGI algorithms running on that, we're looking in a bunch of different areas. We're looking in DeFi with the Singularity DAO project. We're looking in medicine with the Rejuve project. We're looking at decentralized social networks with the Mindplex project. We're looking metaverses with Sophiaverse, which is a metaverse that's inspired and led by avatar versions of the Sophia robot. In each of these areas, DeFi, medicine, social networks, and finance, you can see how AI coming together with decentralization allows Web3 to really shine. I mean, if you look in medicine, where the hell are my medical records stored? Fortunately, I'm rarely sick, but the medical records I've accumulated over my life are stored like in the databases of all manner of different doctors' offices I've gone to in various places around the globe where I've lived. Right, I don't have at this moment personally like a centralized medical data wallet with everything medical that's known about me, which can be fed to machine learning algorithms to, predict what may happen with my health in future, to help diagnose what may happen if it goes wrong, or to contribute to medical research to help with human longevity or curing disease. And we should each have our own medical data wallet encrypted with our own private keys, which should then be entered into various medical applications running on the decentralized web as we wish. Again, no fundamental technological obstacles to that. I mean, we're working on that in the rejuve.io project with the goal of having people accumulate their own medical data and use it to fuel, research on human life extension. But really, this should be how medicine works. It shouldn't be this uncanny, like corrupt mishmash of insurance companies and clinics and government agencies like we have in the US. And I mean, pretty much what's at stake here is like all of our lives. I mean, medical research and medical delivery is tremendously less efficient than it could be because of the centralized way that it's rolled out. Finance, I mean, decentralized finance, everyone knows about. I don't have to tell people too much about that. But what we need to defend against is DeFi just becoming Wall Street all over again, right? I mean, doing trading on crypto is cool, but that doesn't intrinsically give you a democratic, decentralized financial ecosystem. And there's there's a lot of potential to build DeFi systems that will combat global wealth inequality and will help entrepreneurs around the world start new projects and will help people who don't have much money to gradually build their wealth and join the upper echelons of the economy. But we have to focus on that in building our DeFi networks, and there's a lot of creativity that can go on there, and we're trying to do that now within Singularity DAO project, where we're looking at machine learning for automatically trading baskets of altcoins, including lower liquidity altcoins. And the idea there is use ML to identify altcoins that have a tremendous value to grow because of the fundamental power in what we're doing, and then use machine learning to predict and trade these baskets of altcoins. And what we want to make, starting a utility token based project, a really viable way for young people with a brilliant technology idea to start a company, make a fortune, yes, but also unleash amazing new technologies on the world. And we want to make this a viable way for everyone in the world to increase their own net worth. I mean, not via just random speculation and pumping and dumping, but via putting money into tokens representing really solid decentralized technology projects that are then curated, invested, and traded by machine learning algorithms. And there's tremendous potential there, which is just barely tapped. I mean, it may be that the current market dip, which I'm sure will be quite temporary, is a boon because it may cause a bunch of the Ponzi schemes to fall out of the market, and we're left more with DeFi that really is promoting fundamental growth of a beneficial decentralized economy. I mean, social networks, I mean, I almost don't know what to say there. I mean, there's the potential internet social network technology to lead to the emergence of a creative, beneficial global brain with emergent intelligence beyond the intelligence any one person brings into it. I mean, social networks should be the primordial soup of emergent human creativity within which the singularity is brewed, and the next generation of technology and creative artworks is brewed. I mean, instead, what you have is social networks like Facebook or TikTok, which are programming people's brains in almost the stupidest possible ways, just to cause them to click on advertisements, right? And the first step to getting beyond that is to decentralize the ownership and control structure of social networks. So each of us owns and controls our own social media profile. We can take our profile and we can put it into one or another social network quite freely. We can take our friend networks and drag it from one social network into another. And the machine learning that controls what we see, who we get connected to, what information feed we get within the social network, this machine learning is transparent to us, and we can see what it's doing. We can converse with that machine learning agent, and it serves us rather than us serving it. Again, the technology is now there to support this. I mean, it's just barely there, but it is now there. I mean, we have reputation systems that can be used to keep bad actors from dominating social networks with garbage information. We have projects like NewNet, which spun off from SingularityNet, which allows the processing power on everyone's phone and laptop to be brought in to supply the machine learning needed to make decentralized social networks work. I mean, all the supporting infrastructure is now there, but there's a huge traction problem, right? Because you could launch a social network which fundamentally is much better than Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok, but yet everyone is locked into these centralized social networks, and their minds are programmed to keep using these things. And I'm hoping that in the next few years we're going to see, like, the next TikTok will be some decentralized social network built on Web3 infrastructure using SingularityNet AI, maybe using NewNet for processing, but using a whole bunch of new technologies we haven't even imagined yet, and it will dethrone TikTok the way that TikTok is dethroning Facebook. And I mean, if this happens on a decentralized Web3 infrastructure, then maybe there's some hope for the gradual destupidification of the human race, and like for the original promise of the internet to foster global creativity and consciousness awakening to be realized. And that leads me to the last vertical area I want to go into, which is the metaverse. I mean, metaverse, people have been talking about since forever with virtual reality. And when I was in Second Life on the very early days, it's cool. Second Life is still around. I mean, I think virtual and augmented reality have very fundamental role to play, a number of them. I mean, I can't imagine a better way to train young AGI systems to operate in the real world than to have them first learn what they're doing operating in the virtual world, where you don't have to deal with all the headaches of robotics, and the cost of failure is lower. And I think also just prototyping new modes of social organization, new modes of government, new ways of living. I mean, we can experiment with so many things in the virtual world with lower costs than you can do in physical reality. Also, if you look at the technological singularity, I mean, there's a lot of pathways to a technological singularity. Well, why not prototype them in virtual worlds, right? So that we can look at what different paths to singularity are going to be like in virtual realities. And I mean, this is what we're looking at with the Sophiaverse metaverse project that we're building as a SingularityNet spinoff, looking at various possible futures for humanity, building them into virtual worlds with gamified aspects, and let people explore along with AI's various possible futures in the virtual world. And this should be very open-ended, right? It should be so that any group of people anywhere can think about, hey, what kind of reality would I like to be in? What kind of singularity might happen? Can use no code tools to put together, potential shards of this metaverse and play around with there. Invite their friends, invite some AIs to play in there. It should be very open-ended and democratic and decentralized, and a playground for people and AIs together. It absolutely should not be like a Facebook-controlled metaverse where we're going into this virtual world, which is controlled by advertising agencies trying to feed us what will gratify our reptilian emotional responses. So we'll click on more and more ads, right? I think Metaverse is just on the verge of being really possible in terms of being cost effective and usable. And there's the opportunity now to direct it in a democratic, decentralized, creative, and amazing way instead of a corporate and mentally stultifying way. But of course, there's also a big challenge because Facebook, Microsoft, and so forth have humongous amount of money to put into this, and centralizing these things does make the technology simpler, right? Whereas doing it decentralized ecosystem has less funding, it has harder technology problems to overcome. On the other hand, what the decentralized ecosystem does have that the centralized one doesn't is just massive, teaming creativity, because everyone contributing to Web 3.0 and the decentralized internet and the decentralized metaverse, everyone knows that they are genuinely owning and controlling a piece of it rather than it owning and controlling them. And I think this is why Web 3 will win ultimately, because creativity, passion, and human diversity of the heart, mind, and soul in the end will trump greater amounts of money and people working for stock options and salary for their boss within a big company. But it's going to be quite interesting how this unfolds in the next few years. I mean, I think we're really just barely at the point where Web3 can actually work, and so we're in a race really against big tech who would like to squash this decentralized mode of doing things and make it Web 2 forever, where in essence the whole world is owned within their databases and server farms. I think we can win, and I think that things like NFTs are super cool and exciting and have a lot of potential to bring more and more people and more money into Web3 ecosystem, which then will be used to build out the underlying infrastructure to where it works even better than Web 2.0. And that's I think all I have time to say now. I could go on forever with all the different aspects. I've been working for the last few months on how to use NFTs, Web3 tokenization, and machine learning to upend the whole music industry as an example. I mean, you could go through every vertical market, but I think I will stop now. If I have time, answer a few different questions. One question: is it possible to achieve responsible AI without decentralization? I mean, you can't say it's not possible. I think the probability is lower, right? I mean, I think there's a long saying that the best possible government is a benevolent dictator, right? So I mean, in theory, you could have an elite group that created a compassionate, beneficial, loving AGI with everyone's good in mind and launches it upon the world. That would be great. In practice, usually some sort of corruption happens, right? And it can be financial corruption. It can be some government saying like, give your AI to us or we'll murder your family, right? So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with having a beneficial elite group build AI. And in the end, I think the odds of getting beneficial AI are much higher with a decentralized infrastructure. And I think the decentralized internet doesn't have to take over all AI in the world to have the impact it needs to have. I mean, just as open source didn't take over all software in the world, but open source is big enough that it's sort of changed. It's changed the nature of the game, right? Internet runs an open source software, Linux, and now most smartphones in the world run an open source software. Open source has enough penetration to keep the global software world at least a little bit honest. And I think if we have 10, 20, 30% of global AI running on decentralized networks, then that sort of sets the tone for all the rest and can drive things in a much more beneficial direction. Do you see us becoming a Kardashev type 1 civilization in the next 10 to 20 years? Well, the timing of advance of humans toward a super advanced AGI powered civilization, which then can solve the problem of going out to other star systems and so forth. I mean, timing of these things is always hard to predict, and I've been over optimistic about some things, over pessimistic about other things in my past history. What I would say is, once we get to a human level AGI, which is reasonably beneficially oriented toward people, once we get there, then I think it's going to be only a few years till we get to an AI with massively superhuman intelligence, and from there, all bets are off. But yeah, we may be colonizing not only the galaxy but other dimensions that humans haven't even discovered. So I mean, the real question is, when and how can we get to a beneficial human level AGI that can then be the agent inventing the next AIs and the next AIs and so forth, right? And I think Ray Kurzweil has predicted we'll be at 2029 for human level AI, and that certainly seems within reach. I mean, I think we could beat that by a couple of years, or it could be delayed beyond that by a couple of years. But I don't think it's decades away. I think there's a lot of momentum behind AI development now, and even though most of that momentum is toward narrow applications, there's a large spillover into AGI research and development. So yeah, could we be 20 years away from having an incredibly advanced civilization that's guided by engineered super intelligences? I mean, it sounds crazy, but I actually think it's quite feasible. Question is, do you believe at its heart Web3 needs a trust layer? How do you identify the good actors from the bad? In the real world, the finance industry uses credit ratings. Yeah, and credit ratings, of course, are corrupt and just stupid in many different ways, but they do something. They're an approximation. I mean, I've done some work in the past using machine learning to help with credit rating estimation, which was interesting, although I had some ethical qualms about it. But I think this falls under the scope of what I call reputation systems, and we've been prototyping in SingularityNet a reputation system approach called weighted liquid rank reputation systems. I think you can use machine learning and reputation system math together to mediate the process of a social network sort of collectively distinguishing good actors from bad. And I think that hasn't been deployed so far, partly because it's not really what the centralized actors running Web 2.0 especially care about, right? I mean, they care about making money, and they're willing to squash a bunch of good actors and promote a bunch of bad actors in a fundamental ethical sense, if that will make them more money, right? But I think if you have a decentralized network which is not perverted by corporate masters, I believe you can roll out a sounder machine learning driven reputation system that will more accurately estimate trust. And you'll never do that absolutely. It won't solve all problems. But in a decentralized network, there's always a possibility to fork, right? So I mean, if the reputation system within your decentralized social network thinks this group of people is bad actors and they don't agree, I mean, they can fork the code, they can fork the network, they can take their profiles, they can go off somewhere else and run their own social network. And maybe that what happens there is they generate information and experience that shows the main network that they were wrong to label these guys as bad actors. I mean, right now you can't fork your own subnet of Facebook, right? So I mean, there's a lot of flexibility that's there in the decentralized infrastructure that lets reputation rating work better. And I think I'm being told we're out of time. So thanks for all the questions, and thanks everyone for listening.